So much for having me today. As Cass introduced, my name is Chalmers, and I work at an independent online news outlet called Matilda. My official position is as a journalist and editorial assistant, but working in independent media, that means I'm also a coffee maker, a courier runner, and on really bad days, a defamation lawyer. Given that's my background, the obvious thing for me to talk to you today is about the intersection of media and social change. But what I really particularly want to labour is your role in that as consumers of media. More than ever, it's become a cliche to say, but it is true, that more than ever, consumers of media and news have the power to push back and to change the values of us who are making the content. And that's a really important part of social change, which I'll get to in a minute. But first, if I can indulge myself a bit further, I wanted to talk to you about a... How are we going with the slides there? No? Oh, it's not coming. Oh, there we go. I want to talk to you about a story that we ran earlier this week, which ended up getting quite a lot of traction for us. A few months ago, someone came to us with a bunch of emails. They were from this man, who's a professor called Barry Spur, but importantly, he's also advising the National Curriculum Review. His advice to National Curriculum Review was that we should have less Indigenous content in the English curriculum for all students, which, as should be evident from Luke's speech before, is a pretty ridiculous idea. Someone had access to his emails and provided them to us, and they showed that in his emails he'd said some very, very racist and derogatory things about Aboriginal people and clearly did not value their culture. So someone brought that to us, we looked at them, and we decided to publish, and from there the story's blown up quite a bit. And that relates to this woman in terms of what I'm talking about. The woman in the picture on the left, the young one, she's 22 years old. Her name's Freya Newman, and she is a student just up the road at the University of Technology, Sydney. Until earlier this year, she was a completely average student, but then she did something very unusual. She came across information which she thought had to be put in the public realm. Specifically, she saw student records which showed that then opposition leader's daughter, Frances Abbott, had been given a secret scholarship to a design college worth $60,000. A scholarship that had been given to basically no one before, and that the college's website said publicly did not exist. It was a significant story, and Newman's role was that she brought that information into the public. It caused quite a furor and a lot of conversation about higher education and access to politicians. That photo is taken out the front of the Downing Centre Court in Sydney. Newman has now been charged and potentially faces 2 years in prison for accessing those private records. In Australian law, there's very little protection for whistleblowers, and so that will not mitigate her sentence, almost certainly. And the reason that I bring these two cases up, to get to the first thing I wanted to leave you with today, is that as members of the public, you must stand with whistleblowers. They are the ones who do the job for all of us. They're the ones who put themselves at risk. And when we think of whistleblowers, we think of the big names, like the Edward Snowdens, the big, dramatic things. They go around the world and then they sort of piss off and go to Russia or something and get asylum. But the whistleblowers we really need are people like Freya Newman and the guy who brought us the documents showing those emails. Those are the people we rely on for an open, transparent, democratic system. So the first thing I wanted to say was please, in whichever way you can, rally around and support the work of whistleblowers. The second thing, and this should be a very easy one for anyone who reads any news at all, is to get angry. This was a cover that the Courier Mail ran in October. The woman in that cover was murdered by her partner in absolutely horrific circumstances. Now, we know that domestic violence is an enormous issue in Australia, and also violence against trans people. As it turned out, this woman was trans. So the Courier Mail thought they'd approach this serious issue by having a bit of fun with it, turning it into a bit of a freak show, and basically mocking a murdered victim of domestic violence. The good news was people got really angry, and they got angry on social media. They wrote letters to the Press Council. They got angry around the world, and in fact, the pushback against this story was so strong that the Courier Mail did eventually have to apologise, they won't do this again. Next time they have a story like this, as bad as they can be in a sort of tabloid way, I think we can confidently say they won't victimise someone in the way they did again. And that was because consumers of media pushed back and made their voice heard. So that was the second thing I wanted to leave you with. Get angry. I know it's exhausting. I know the media does a terrible job sometimes, especially for minority groups and people who are more vulnerable. But when you push back, they do hear you. And no matter how nasty or pig-headed the editor, it does weigh on them and it will change the way they write. The last thing, very briefly, I wanted to say was read widely. Now, when I wrote this slide, I was thinking, read the independent media, read guys like us if you have time, have a look at Crikey, Inside Story, and read your student media, for God's sake. If you're a student media is a great place where new social ideas get a chance to flourish. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, the other thing you have to do is also read the newspapers that you don't agree with. Try and stay across the papers you don't like. And at a guess, I'm sure there's a lot of people here who probably don't read the Telegraph as regularly, wouldn't read papers like the Courier Mail, maybe don't even read the Australian. I find them hard sometimes, but it's very important to know what the other side is saying. It's important to know that the Courier Mail is demonising people like that. It's important to know that the Herald Sun runs front pages attacking people on the disability support pension, because it helps us know what ideas the public are being presented with and how we can instrument social change. We can't have the conversation on our own to ourselves. We have to know what's being said generally. And occasionally it will also challenge us, coming from a different viewpoint, to think critically about our own views. That was all I wanted to leave you with today. So in summary, please support whistleblowers, get angry, and probably good advice in life generally, read as widely as you can. Thank you.